Are you ready to perform at your highest potential? Welcome to the Performance Matters podcast from GP Strategies, your workforce transformation partner. In each episode, we'll interview industry experts and explore best practices and innovative insights to help your organization improve performance. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Performance Matters podcast for part 2 of storytelling how-tos for learning and development. Joining me here in the virtual studio once again is master storyteller and fellow creative director, Eric Myers. Eric, how are you today?
I am well, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful, especially because I've got a master storyteller captive here where I can just pick your brain here. So I know it's been several weeks with the magic of podcasts where we've been talking about things. In our past session, you know, we sort of broke down this idea of what is storytelling. You introduced a very cool 3-step process of how you approach this idea of really crafting a story almost out of thin air. So listeners, if you haven't checked out the episode, I believe it is 101, believe it or not, part 1 of storytelling, I would encourage you to go back in there. Eric had outlined an idea of, and this is his patented process. I believe it's patented. I don't know, you tell me, Eric, if it's pending or not. But it was concept. So what is the thing you're looking to frame your story on? Color, which is what are the experiences surrounding your concept? And then the challenge would be, what is that behavior change or that desired action change? Kind of like the moral of the story that you want your audience to do, think, believe, feel going forward. So Eric, how did I do with that synopsis of talking about the overall process? Do I get like a B minus? I mean, anything you want to add to that?
A minus sounds good. It's
I'll take it.
Yeah, because you can never give anybody the pure A, because then they're like, oh, I'm perfect. I don't need to improve. Just kidding. No, that was great.
What am I missing here about what we kind of recapped about what is storytelling? Why, let me ask you this. Why does it matter? Let's say that. Why is it so important in business and learning development to have stories? So for those that can't just bother, scrolling to episode 101 and doing that, why does it matter again, real quick?
Good. Well, yeah, I would say that it matters especially for learning and development because we're in the business of transformation. We're in the business of developing talent, helping people learn new things, and stories have been proven throughout history to be useful for this. And so it's a little bit of a shame that we're just talking about it now in 2023, but hey, better late than never.
Absolutely. So right now we're going to talk about some how-tos, dive into some real tips and strategies. So Eric, from your perspective, how can storytelling apply to learning and development? So give me a couple of examples just offhand where you're seeing opportunities to do this.
Yeah, I see it all the time. And I mean, I guess it's the benefit of being a creative director in this space where we're constantly seeing content or deliverables or whatever that are intended to be for training purposes and learning purposes, is that I keep seeing us do a lot of what I would just call stuff and things. we're delivering
what was that?
Documents.
Stuff and things?
Stuff
or stuffing things?
No, stuff and things, but stuff
like
and things could be interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, ampersand. There you go. Stuff and things, like learning and development. But
okay.
Yeah, I see that we deliver a lot of things like that because we get in the rhythm of, we want to deliver things and we're on deadlines and all this kind of stuff. But I think that when it comes to applying storytelling to L&D, first of all, it is a process and it is time consuming to really be intentional about developing or bringing a storytelling mindset to a learning and development project or a particular deliverable. It's not something that you can just, you can't whip out a couple paragraphs and call it good and think that you built good story into there. So it applies because, like I was saying in the beginning, that stories, they can help teach things. They can help inform. right? But they can also inspire, they can also entertain, they can also prompt an audience to take some sort of action. And that depth of storytelling and that depth of impact is something that we often don't get to in L&D because we're more interested in just telling the what. What is it that the learner needs
Oh,
to
right.
know? Feed them facts. And we see it across industries, right? Some industries are worse than others at it. Um, but I think that's the problem, is that we have an opportunity to achieve real transformation through storytelling, but we get in the habit of just communicating the what, and we don't really get into the impact, that we could have,
The
talking about
stuff
whatever
and
that
things,
topic
as you
is.
said.
Yeah, stuff and things.
I
It's
love
it's
stuff and things.
stuff, and I say that all the time. Whenever we're creating something, I'm like, "Are we just making stuff and things?" People will get sick of me saying that, but it's a
No,
good
I
challenge.
like what you're saying there. So you're saying we can apply it. We need to start with that intention of where's an opportunity, being intentional about what are you actually doing instead of just getting into making content. It's like,
Yeah,
do we have an
yeah,
opportunity here to lock in the learning to just like we've said with cave drawings, it's like, do we have an opportunity to transfer that knowledge in a way that's more effective and more meaningful?
yeah. I think meaningful impact is what we're after. Learning and
Okay.
development. If learning and development professionals could kind of harness that, that would
Hmm.
make a huge difference in the things that we create for the learner.
Okay. So I want to also pivot here because part of what we do in learning development as an independent company is you also have to win the business. You have to win
Hmm.
projects. We're often not employees per se, but we are uh, discussing and persuading clients of our value proposition and everything. So, have you seen storytelling as an approach in that vein in terms of the selling process, the marketing process?
Yeah, absolutely, and that is probably professionally, that is likely where I have the most experience. And one of the things that sticks out for me, and it's a it's a badge of honor because it's almost to the point of ridiculous, is I was involved in a project where we literally wrote a children's book as the pitch, if you will, to the client, and they were so intrigued by the fact that this is what we delivered as our proposal response that they invited us to come present it. Well, we went all in. We doubled down. We said, grab your carpet squares, turn the lights down. It's nappy time. We're going to sit up there with a little spotlight
Whoa.
and read the book. And that's the purest thing that I can think of. I mean, it's literal storytelling,
Okay,
and it's in
so
the sense of
let
sales.
me just clarify this. You mean you actually produced like a Dr. Seuss book or something like that? Is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
absolutely. And it's funny you say Dr. Seuss because it was very much along the lines of that kind of thing. It was highly illustrated. The words, it was very short and rhymey and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, yeah, good call.
So, like the purchasing person was probably like, "Dude, where's my PowerPoint deck?" Right? And
Exactly.
they've got this beautiful analog book in their hand. That's awesome. But okay,
Yep.
so before we even talk about all that stuff, did you end up winning the business?
Of course. I wouldn't tell the story if we didn't. Unless it was a lesson in
Like,
failure, but no, that was
yes, the
that was one
lesson
where we won.
was the lesson was, yeah, I lost my job. And no, 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 no. Storytelling, don't do it, kids. It's a cautionary tale.
Yeah, that one was a positive outcome for sure. And we've done,
Okay.
some similar things that were, I would say, from a that client storytelling perspective, were equally
Right.
as theatrical, in terms of bringing that element of storytelling and thematics and whatnot to the experience. But yeah, there is an opportunity to do it on the client facing side for sure when you're trying to win
Okay.
business.
So I'm gonna put your storytelling chops on the spot here. And let's just say you've got client X. We'll just say it's Acme Incorporated, okay? And they've asked you to propose a let's say a learning transformation for Acme, okay?
Hmm.
And in the typical concept, you'd come in, you'd say, here's our recommendations, here's what it looks like. And, then the meatball at the end, which is always, it says next steps,
Yep,
that
yep,
kind of
yep.
thing. What would you say, like, if you were kind of framing that out and you said, you know what, we want to come in and we want to tell a story. And you know what, we're not going to go as far as you did of making a Dr. Seuss book. We're going to use PowerPoint. you know I don't want to give my security blanket, but how would you weave, what would be some suggestions you'd say to weave a story into a client pitch or presentation? What would be some essential recommendations using your concept, color, and challenge um, archetype?
So let's just take, for example, the you said the Acme, right? Let's say the
Yeah,
Acme
let's just say it's
learner.
Acme, right?
Yeah. So I'd say, okay, if the objective for the Acme end learner is to, you know, we want them to do something different so that Acme can sell more, something like that. And the thing that we're asking them to do different, it would be a dramatic change for that end user or that end learner. So what we can do is say, okay, if we recognize that that is a dramatic change, what do we know about this learner in terms of their ability to adapt to change? And if we say, well, they haven't dealt with change very well in the past, they've been resistant, we can start to infer that this is going to be a very difficult process because we're asking them to make a quantum leap from where they are today to where the client wants them to be by the time we're done with them. And we know that they're going to be resistant to it. So now what we can do is start looking at each other in the room and say, let's talk about hard experiences we've had, tough things, tough moments, things where we had to push through to get to the other side, and the other side was great. So once we start doing that, we start sharing stories. We might find something that, let's just say, our account person who knows Acme says, oh my gosh, I know that this client dealt with something similar to what you talked about, Eric. You talked about this experience with da 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 da. Hey, let's use that as the foundational story because we know that it's going to connect with our client audience in a meaningful way. There's a shared experience there. And as long as we can tie it back to the challenge, the behavior change, if you will, then we're going to have something that wins. So if we look at that concept color challenge, we know that the challenge is the end behavior that we want to achieve. We know that the color is the experience that we agreed would resonate with the client. And the concept is what we're after, right? The concept is this, it's selling more or whatever. It's the goal that the client has, that if the person does the thing, they're going to achieve this. So we have all the components there. It's just a matter of how do we organize them. And sometimes when you're coming up with, in that case, like a client story situation, it's really hard to do it on your own. You do need a team because you need to have that intelligence around what is the client that we're dealing with, what's their personal experience with different things in life, what's their life journey. We need to know what the experience is of the end learner and where they are. So it takes a village, so to speak, if you want to put something compelling together with that kind of client facing storytelling.
Interesting. So it's almost like, we always hear about, in the entertainment world, there's a writer's room and people are,
Mm-hmm.
vibing ideas off. Maybe when it's your proposal, you have that proposal room. And so maybe one of those questions that you might want to ask to the group is just really, what is this? Obviously you have in a request for a proposal what the client wants, but it's like, okay, what are the challenges in making that happen? And then maybe how do
Mm-hmm.
we weave that into a narrative where you even address some of those very real things? Like you said, change is hard. And, here are some ways that your organization will be facing this and doing this. And,
Mm-hmm.
you bring an actual central character into it or something like that. Is that kind of
I,
what you're saying?
I think that's a good synopsis. And there's also one other thing that I would say from a tips and tricks perspective, and that is
Okay.
ask or pose the question to your client in that case, have you ever? Start with that. So if we go back to the example we were talking about where we have a group that's resistant to change and it's going to be very difficult, right? The have you ever question could just be, hey, Mr. and Miss Client, have you ever experienced a situation where you had to do something that you really didn't want to do, right? You get their head nod, then you have the launching point for your story, and you've got them connected right off the bat because they have immediately connected with a shared experience that you just asked them about. That's one other thing that I'd say from if you were selling a story to a client, that's one thing that I'd do.
Okay, Eric. So let's apply this now to more. When I say participant facing, I mean like learning content. So something, it's the stuff and things, but we want to do stuff and things better, and we want to inject some storytelling into learning and development here. So,
Right.
what would be some approaches that you would have for our listeners?
When we're talking about deploying learning and development initiatives across an organization, we could be talking tens or hundreds or thousands of participants, all of whom have unique experiences. So it is not exactly the same, but I do think there are some shared elements. One of those things being you've got to be able to tune into what we would consider universal human either experiences or emotions. We don't. So if we think of that, the concept color challenge model, right? The colors that we all bring to our lives are going to be vastly different. So if I try to infuse, and I'll give you an example for me personally. When I started my career as a police officer, it was cut short due to an injury, and for me to infuse that story about me being a police officer and getting injured into a learning and development program that's going to touch 10,000 people who none of whom are cops, that doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? It just wouldn't be a story that audience would necessarily buy into. And it's not to say that you can't share unique stories in a learning and development context, but you have to be really sensitive to how it might be perceived kind of unintentionally. Because if I make a story too personal to my life and you don't relate to it, you're going to infer something from that I may not intend. So we have to be very careful to develop stories that are rather universal. And sometimes that means people will go, everything's going to be boring. Everything's going to be vanilla. Well, not necessarily. Now that's where the art of the storytelling comes in. So you could take, and I'll just throw out an example. If you did something around the concept of loss, right? Everyone on the planet who is of professional working age, I would say, has experienced loss of some kind, whether it's the loss of a relative, a friend, a pet, a job, loss in the sense of like you didn't achieve something you wanted to. It doesn't have to be death, right? It could be something that's just that feeling of you feel let down. All right. So there's a concept. I could tell a very simple story of somebody, and let's just take school, for example, somebody who really tried hard, did their best, was really looking forward to getting that 100% on their final exam and in 8th grade or something like that. And then they didn't achieve it and they felt let down. Okay. Pretty basic story. We've probably all experienced that. So on the surface, it may not seem that interesting, but if I can develop the character who experiences that thing enough, and I can get the learner to look at that character and see a bit of themselves in that character as I develop him or her, then we've got a little bit of an emotional connection. So when we tell the story of them getting a B on a test instead of an A, the learner isn't going, I don't care. They're like, oh, that stinks. And if they had that reaction, you know that you can now present them with whatever the challenge is that you want to present to them in the learning space, right? You've got to get the learning audience hooked on the character and relating to the character in some sort of shared way. That's hard to do. And that's why I say this is the kind of thing that you can't do in a day and turn out that deliverable of things and stuff or stuff and things.
Right.
But you've got to be really, really intentional about how is everything that I'm telling you about this character helping or hurting the emotional investment of the learner in that character's story. And if I can get to the end of that and go, no, I think I've got something compelling here, then you can kind of leap to what do you want your learner to do with that information? It's nuanced, but it's different.
I would say in some cases, it might not be as hard as someone might think, because if the stuff and things that you're making is really role focused, like it's not, it's very much for, let's say, a sales associate or a customer service associate in a very specific industry. I think you could actually go back to, if your organization has done a proper design thinking and learning session, you've got personas that you are basing and validating things off of. I think you could essentially bring those personas to life and start really touching the heartstrings of someone. Because if I'm taking one of these learning pieces, let's say it's an e-learning or it's a video, and I'm basically a living, breathing version of that persona, you're going to get my attention pretty quick when you start adding, you know, connecting me to the character beyond just the character is here and what option of this branching scenario, right? I'm actually
100%.
caring about them, as you said in part one. So go back to that one if you haven't listened to it, gang. That you're along for the ride with this person.
Yep.
I'm going to
just get them in the passenger seat, right?
Yeah, I'm just going to say to you, Eric, maybe for us, it maybe doesn't have to be as frightening if you're dealing with a very specific topic. Now, if it's a company-wide type thing, you're right. Then
could be different.
I would say there, but you're kind of getting me excited about this idea, though, of tying back to personas and going, okay, how do we bring that to life and make people care about this individual and or at minimum just pay attention to them.
Yeah, I think there's
so that's cool.
There are some lessons that learning and development professionals could take from marketing. And you're nailing it right there, talking about personas. No responsible marketing professional would launch some initiative without considering their audience personas that they built their campaigns for. And we should be doing the same thing from the L&D perspective. But I know, and I've fallen victim to this many times before, we sometimes, again, go to the stuff and things, or things and stuff, whichever way you want to go. We tend to sometimes ignore that. We don't stop long enough to ask a question: who's really the audience that we're dealing with, and do you have learner personas built? And if the client doesn't, then we should stop long enough to develop those, because you're 1,000% right. If we try speaking to someone that's not willing to hear us because we're not speaking their language or in a way that resonates with them, we're missing a huge opportunity. And that should be basic blocking and tackling, but it is hugely important to developing good story content. So I'm with you 1,000%. Let's get in our soapbox and take a stand there.
Yeah. Well, let's say this. So if you are listening to this and you're saying, okay, how do you get started? I think what you're saying, Eric, is let's go back to the basics of, you should, in a modern learning organization, the idea is the learner's experience trumps the content. And that's exactly, if you're solving or making products in the marketing world, you start with a design thinking session where you go, okay, what is our targeted learners' challenge? What is their life like? You're not going, I am making a product. You're going, it's the idea of see a need, fill a need. And I think with what you're talking about, if we invest in a proper design thinking session that's focused on the learner and their experience, I think we could actually unfold a lot of compelling stories along their learner journey. So it might just be, there's the idea, there's 5 moments of learning need that we've heard Matt Donovan talk about on the pod several times. And one of those is when stuff goes wrong, when I need to learn something new, when I'm just learning for the first time, when I'm expanding. And each one of those, if you've got that persona, man, now I'm starting to see everything go where you could apply your concept, color, and challenge to each of those touchstones. And then just kind of like Star Wars with the Clone Wars and Jar Jar Binks, then you have all the little storylines unfold off of that. So
yep.
I think you're on to something here. This is amazing stuff. I know we've kept you for a long time, Eric. So to end part 2, I would just say, I know you mentioned Joseph Campbell and The Hero with 1,000 Faces as a book. Do you have any other resources that you'd recommend for those that are aspiring to kick up their learning and development game?
Probably the best thing, and it's going to sound cheesy, but listen and watch others. Go find somebody, and it could be online, or you could actually go find and look up stuff in your local area where they're having storytelling events, or even, like I said, spoken word events. Or find somebody on YouTube that you really enjoy, because what I will tell you is that there is such a wide variety of styles and approaches to storytelling. Like, there are some, I cannot remember the name of the gentleman, but he's a Scottish guy, and outside of just the accent being very endearing, he's one of these guys that even on camera, he sucks you in, and I don't know what it is about him. I don't know if it's technique. I don't know if it's kind of his character, his look, but there are certain people that you'll gravitate to, and so I would encourage people to look and listen and watch others and pick up little nuggets from them. If you're a reader, start with Joseph Campbell. It'll take you a while to finish it anyway. And then from there are many other subsequent publications that he did around the kind of developing the story concept even more. Or get plugged into some sort of local thing in your scene, whether it be around poetry or actual literal, storytelling organizations. That's what I would do.
Okay, so Eric, when you said the Scottish guy, was it the guy that does the "Give me the baby"? Is that the one you're talking about?
Nope. But I'll take that.
You keep the mojo. Give me the baby.
Give me the baby. Not that one. I believe his name was Mike Meyer. Oh, no.
I don't know if we'll keep that one. Give me the baby.
Give me the baby.
Want my baby back, baby back.
Rips.
Oh, dude. Hey, well, listen, Eric, on behalf of our many listeners around the globe, I want to thank you for sharing so much of your wisdom and knowledge and experiences and story with us over the past 2 sessions. So thank you so much, sir.
You got it. It has been a pleasure, and I look forward to next time we can connect up and do something else fun. This was a blast.
The Performance Matters podcast is brought to you by GP Strategies. Together, we can create a world where business excellence makes possibilities achievable. You can subscribe to the show anywhere you get podcasts or listen on our website at gpstrategies.com.